In this video, we will break down the whole IELTS exam and we will look at the two different types of IELTS exam, and then I will let you know which IELTS exam is for you. So let's begin. Hi there, this is Mr. Brick, and on this channel we cover everything IELTS related. That includes tips, tricks and IELTS tutorials. So if this is something that you're interested in, consider subscribing. Now let's get started. So this video will be broken down into 5 stages. First, we will look at what is the IELTS exam and which IELTS exam is for you. Then we will look at the 4 different components of the IELTS exam, and that includes the listening section, the reading section, the writing section, and finally the speaking section. So what is the IELTS exam? Well, IELTS stands for the International English Language Testing System, and the IELTS test is the world's most popular English language proficiency test for higher education and global migration. So who is this test for? Well, the IELTS test is taken by people who want to move to a country where English is spoken as the first language. This includes countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the USA, and the UK. Now, there are 2 main reasons why people should take the IELTS exam. The first reason is if you want to get a job in an English-speaking country. And the second reason is if you want to study at higher education level, meaning university level, in an English-speaking country. Now, when I say English-speaking country, this just means a country where English is spoken as the first language. Now, there are 2 different types of IELTS exam. We have the general test and we have the academic test. Now, which IELTS exam should you take? Well, that all depends on why you want to move abroad. If, for example, you want to move abroad because you want to study at university, like Cambridge University, then in that case, you should take the academic IELTS test. Whereas if you want to move abroad because you want to secure a job, then in that case, you would take the general IELTS test. So let's look at the differences between the 2 tests. Well, the general IELTS test is taken by those people who want to move to an English-speaking country for the purpose of work. Now let's look at what the IELTS exam consists of. So the IELTS test is made up of 4 sections, and those 4 sections are listening, reading, writing, and speaking. So you will take the listening, the reading, and the writing test all in one day, and that's usually one after the other, so there'll be no breaks. Whereas the speaking section of the exam is taken at a separate time. Now, the speaking exam can be taken on the same day as the rest of your exam, or it can be taken up to 7 days before or 7 days after the rest of your exam. Now, the reason why you will take the speaking exam separately to the rest of the exam is because the speaking exam is carried out directly by an IELTS examiner. So you'll be one-to-one with the examiner, whereas the listening, reading and writing section will be taken most likely in an exam hall, just like you would do at high school or secondary school. Now let's look at the IELTS exam in a bit more detail. So how long does the IELTS exam actually last for? Well, the whole exam lasts for 2 hours and 45 minutes. So the listening section of the exam lasts for 30 minutes plus an extra 10 minutes for you to transfer all your answers from the question paper to the answer paper. but I will explain this in a bit more detail later on. Now, the reading section lasts for 60 minutes and the writing section lasts for another 60 minutes. Now let's talk about the listening exam. So there are 4 sections of the listening exam, and these are all in order of difficulty. So section 1 of the listening exam is the easiest, and then section 2 gets harder, section 3 gets a little bit more harder, and then section 4 is the most difficult. And as I said before, the listening exam itself lasts for 40 minutes. So you'll have 30 minutes where you answer all your questions on a question paper, and then you'll be given an extra 10 minutes to transfer all your answers onto an answer sheet. However, this is only the case for the paper-based exam. So if you take the IELTS test on a computer, then you will not be given this additional 10 minutes. And that is because the answers that you write are the answers that are saved. You don't need to transfer them from one place to another. Now, the format of the listening exam is exactly the same. It does not matter whether you take the academic test or the general test. And the total marks for the listening exam is out of 40. And if you want to learn how to get a high score in the listening exam, I made this playlist, so feel free to check that out. Now let's talk about the reading test. The reading test lasts for 60 minutes and the total marks are out of 40. And unlike the listening exam, the reading exam is different depending on whether you take the academic test or the general test. So let's break down the reading exam for the general test, and then we will break it down for the academic test. So the general test. Now in this part of the exam, the reading section can be broken down into 3 different parts. Now in the first part, you will be given 2 or 3 short texts, and in the second part, you'll be given 2 short texts, and the texts are normally about topics such as work. And in the final section, you'll be given 1 long text, and the topic of this long text is usually just a general topic. Now in the academic reading exam, there will be again 3 sections, but you will only be given 1 reading text per section. All 3 of the texts will be similar in length, and the texts that are given to you are all authentic, and they usually come from books, journals, or even newspapers. Now, I have made a video on the best tips to improve your reading score, and I will leave that in the description below. Now let's talk about the writing test. Now, the writing test lasts for 60 minutes, and in those 60 minutes, you will be expected to answer both writing task 1 and writing task 2. And you should split the time in the following way. So 20 minutes of those 60 minutes should be spent on writing task 1, and the remaining 40 minutes should be spent on writing task 2. And the reason for this is because writing task 1 is only worth 1/3 of the marks, whereas writing task 2 is worth the other 2/3 of the marks. Now, the writing test is different for both the general and the academic test. So let's talk about them separately. And just like we did with the reading exam, we will start off with the general test. And in writing task 1, you will be presented with a situation. So you might be asked to write a letter requesting information or explaining the situation. Now, you can write the letter in a personal style, a semi-formal style, or a formal style. And in task 2, you will be asked to write an essay in response to a point of view, an argument, or a problem. Okay, now let's talk about the academic IELTS test. Now, in the academic version of the test, you'll be expected to write in a formal style. And just like the general test, here you will also be given 2 tasks to complete: writing task 1 and writing task 2. And for writing task 1, you'll be shown a picture of either a graph, a table, a chart, or a diagram. And then you'll be asked to describe, summarize, and explain the information in this image. And for writing task 2, you'll be required to write an essay of at least 250 words. Now, for this type of question, you will be presented with a topic and you'll be tested on your ability to respond by giving and justifying your opinion. So you may have to discuss the topic, summarize the details, outline the problem, or identify possible solutions. And you will have to support your answer with some examples and some reasons. Now, there are many different types of questions that you could be asked for writing task 2, and here on your screen you can see some examples. Now let's move on to the final section, and that is the speaking test. So the speaking test is exactly the same whether you take the general or the academic test. So everything I say will apply to both tests. So firstly, the speaking exam is broken down into 3 parts. We have part 1, part 2, and part 3. So let's start with part 1. So in part 1, the examiner will first introduce themselves, and then they will ask you to introduce yourself. The examiner will then ask you to confirm your identity, and that's where you will give your formal ID. The examiner will then ask you general questions about familiar topics, such as questions about your family, about your home, what subjects you have studied in the past, and your hobbies and interests. So a typical question from part 1 of the exam could be, do you have a lot of spare time? Or they might ask you, what do you like to do in your spare time? Now, not many people know this, but questions from part 1 of the speaking exam are purposely asked by the examiner so they can help you feel relaxed and help you speak naturally. Now let's look at part 2. So in part 2, the examiner will give you a card, and on this card, you will be given a topic along with some questions about the topic that you can answer. And your aim for this section is to speak about the topic between 1 and 2 minutes without stopping. Now, that might seem like a long time to speak, especially without stopping. So because of this, the examiner will give you 60 seconds before you start speaking so you can prepare some notes on what you will say. Now, I will make a separate video on what you should include in these notes, so make sure you subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you can be updated as to when the video will go live. Now, the examiner will explain the instructions to you in the exam, and they will let you know that your 60 seconds will start now. And then once they say that to you, at that moment you have 60 seconds to write and make notes, and then the examiner will just say stop. Once your 60 seconds will be over, the examiner will then instruct you to speak between 1 to 2 minutes. The examiner will not interrupt you whilst you are speaking. However, once the 2 minutes are over and you are still speaking, the examiner will again say stop. At that moment, you will know that your 2 minutes are over. Now, don't worry if you have reached the 2-minute mark and you have not finished speaking about everything you wanted to say. That will not go against you. And also, once your 2 minutes are over, the examiner will then proceed to ask you 1 or 2 follow-up questions. And this brings us to part 3 of the speaking exam, and this is the final part of the exam. So here the examiner will ask you further questions that are directly related to the questions in part 2 of the exam. And these questions in part 3 are specifically designed to help you discuss abstract ideas with the examiner. So just like part 1 of the exam, part 3 will be a back and forth between you and the examiner. Now, the whole IELTS speaking exam will be recorded and it will be carried out by an official IELTS examiner. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you have any questions, pop them in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.